Thanks to all of you that have joined today's session as well. We really, really appreciate it. For those of you that have just joined, we were just saying the weather here in London is absolutely beautiful today. I hope it is wherever you are in the rest of the world. And I know I can see by the names, I've got some very friendly and familiar faces in there. So thank you to all of our friends, colleagues and our network for joining our launch event. We're incredibly excited to have you here. This is our very first webinar for Unleashed, which I'm very, very excited about. And we've got some incredible people to talk to you today, some real thought leaders in their space. So we are joined by the wonderful Pat Whelan, CEO of Paddle HR. We've got the very talented Natalie Denham-Bradley, who is the Talent and Inclusion Manager for Body Shop. We've got the lovely Kerry Goodman, HR Director for Brightside Insurance. And we've got Romeo Epps, CEO of Romeo Epps and Inclusion Specialist and CEO. We'll also notice on the panel today, we are joined by my partner in crime and very talented business partner, Samantha Seal. And also we've got the lovely Sarah Thompson joining us to help and support us as part of the Unleashed family. So thank you, everybody. The purpose of today's webinar was really to start to think about how, as leaders, we start to future-proof our organisations and start to think about how we ensure inclusion and diversity. They're subjects that are incredibly topical right now, especially with the pandemic around COVID-19. Most of the conversations that Sam and I have been having with our network and our friends and our colleagues are very much around how do we prepare for the future of work, given the constant state of change right now, and also in response to the Black Lives Matter movement gaining the deserved momentum that it is getting right now in light of the George Floyd murder in the US. Organisations are now under increased pressure to really step up and be representative and inclusive. And so we wanted to explore that with some of our panellists today, and also give you the opportunity to ask any questions or share any thoughts or feedback or ideas that you've got with the people on the call today or with ourselves. And we'll do our very, very best to answer as many questions as we can and to give you some practical tips that you can take away from some of our expert panel. So without further ado, I'll hand over to my very talented business partner to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I know some of you. I've seen some names popping up on the call. It's really great to meet everybody else that's joined today and to be getting Unleashed underway. And as Martin mentioned, we're going to be using the chat and the Q&A function in a couple of different ways today. For those of you that have joined since he mentioned that, anything you want to send through to everybody on the whole webinar, please use the chat function for thoughts and ideas. If there's very specific questions, please do pop it in the Q&A function. If we have time towards the end of the conversations, we'll get there. And if we don't manage to answer all the questions today, we'll certainly come back to you individually and make sure that anything is rounded off after this. So without further ado, we'll head into the conversation. Let's crack into it. And we're going to be going first to between kind of Natalie and Pat for the first few rounds of questions. So over to Natalie first, please. What would you say has been your approach to talent management at the Body Shop?
Yeah, hi Sam. Okay, so thank you for inviting me. So our approach to talent management at the Body Shop, we were quite fortunate when we picked this up and started with it maybe kind of about 2 years ago. The Body Shop as a company had been through quite a lot of change and a change of ownership. So we were under the ownership of Natura now, and with a pretty much kind of blank slate in terms of our approach to talent management. So we really decided that we wanted our approach to be based on the principles of inclusivity and to deliver an agile kind of organisation, or as much agility within our organisation as possible. Because I think, you know, even 2 years ago, I mean, we've seen massive changes this year, but even 2 years ago, there were you know, there was big anticipation of change in kind of go-to-market technologies and how we would trade as a retail business going forward. And so providing us with that agility was a priority. The other thing that we wanted to do was make it really as simple as possible for everyone to be able to engage with, and for those conversations to be held kind of regularly and continuously at all levels, really. So right from kind of leadership levels to employee levels. And we put in some tools to provide kind of common language for that, so that everyone could take up those conversations either in a coaching way or for those discussions to be had sort of in a strategic way at leadership level. And I think sort of thinking back to when we started our approach, we were also working with new kind of information that we had from our employee engagement survey. And that was really important for us, that we had a process that would be engaging to everyone as an inclusive process. And that's kind of how we ended up getting in touch with Pat and coming together with Paddle. So one of the things that became really clear through the feedback we'd received was that career visibility or career opportunities and the visibility of those in our organisation wasn't accessible to everybody. So our first kind of venture with Paddle was to introduce the career pathing tool, which was really well received. And that was primarily an engagement tool, but also part of this set of tools that we were trying to provide for people to be able to manage their own development.
That sounds super interesting. And the thought that I'm having after that is, as COVID-19 then hit, has any of that, I'm assuming there's been a change, but has any of that changed in light of COVID-19?
I think the principles have not changed in their kind of what they sort of boil down to, and the essential sort of piece around our talent management approach. But the urgency to be agile and to identify our talent and have effective conversations has obviously escalated over the last few months massively in a huge spike. And so we needed to identify the skills that we had in our organisation and to redeploy at pace those individuals into critical roles. We had new areas that we wanted to really push forward with the business, a new set of objectives that we needed to meet. And so that became our priority. So working really kind of at speed to accelerate the process we'd started. And when we first met Pat and talked about Paddle, we had a conversation which felt quite futuristic when we first had it, about the new functionality that the platform would be able to provide. We talked about it allowing us to be more agile as an organisation and to do that redeployment. And then we suddenly had this perfect opportunity to test out some of that functionality, and I worked in partnership to make that a reality and launch that within our markets very, very quickly, which was primarily, which Pat will talk about more, I'm sure, a tool to be able to search and identify skills and talent within our organisation and map it very quickly, and then to be able to redeploy, but also a kind of project marketplace that allowed us to showcase or kind of advertise to our organisation the areas that we were looking for skills in, so that people could come naturally to that as well. So we sort of had a two-pronged approach to getting that done.
Absolutely, and the words that are resonating there for me are at pace, speed, very quickly. And I think a lot of people can certainly resonate with that over the last few months, as whatever everybody is doing has kind of escalated in one way or another. So I'm definitely feeling that pace coming through the conversation there. Thanks, Natalie. Over to Pat. I'd love to understand a little bit more about how Paddle supported the Body Shop and what the impact and return on investment has been.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Natalie mentioned, kind of the first product we worked with was all about kind of the long-term lens on career growth. So what roles would make sense for the future in your career, and presenting that information down to employees really early and often. And the idea there is it's not about facilitating a move. That's important, but that's the second step. The first step is communicating that career growth opportunity, showing the skills gap analysis, allowing it to become an input into some of those development conversations. And so we launched that, and we always had this idea that when you have that long-term view, what's really important is to think about what are the short-term steps you're going to take in order to realize that long-term view. And one of those ideas was projects, and it could be a really important professional development opportunity to try out working in a new division with new skills, something along those lines. And I think as Natalie alluded, I think it was something that was of interest, but on the horizon a little further out than maybe we had anticipated. And then what happened with the pandemic was all of a sudden that change that was going to take months and quarters and maybe even a year plus needed to happen in a couple of weeks. And so we were able to get out our project marketplace to the body shop in just a couple of weeks. And that allowed talent to be redeployed, whether it was translate a piece of work or use your store manager in Vancouver, use your Photoshop skills to produce posters for APAC or whatever the case may be. And that utilization of internal talent to solve those problems allowed Natalie to speak more to this if she'd like, but allowed to essentially redirect work that would have gone outside of the organization with the costs associated and put it into the organization and to folks and talent that they already had who were disrupted and able to do their normal work because of the pandemic. So that the ROI case there, I think was really interesting and quick to come back because of the pandemic.
Yeah, what really struck me from what you were saying there particularly was a plan that you had that was going to take months, however many months to implement, suddenly got done in weeks. And I think that kind of to Natalie's point that she was making before about the speed and pace of change, what a fantastic opportunity to be able to be agile in that moment and bring that forward.
Absolutely. And I think that there's kind of two big things that have struck me about the pandemic. And the first is exactly what you said, which was we had this problem, not just at the body shop, but with lots of clients. We had this product, really wanted to launch it, but the change management around moving towards a project-based work that was going to cross divisions felt like a huge mountain to climb. But the risk of change totally diminished at the beginning of the pandemic because the way we work was already broken. So the only place to go is up from here. And it allowed for not just paddle products, but other things we sell from our clients, things that were slated for well into the future, being piloted and tested in a really rapid way because that risk just disappeared. That was a really big takeaway for us.
Amazing, thank you. And back to Natalie. In the light of all of this, do you have any advice to people in the process of reviewing their talent in the future?
I think one of the things that Pat and I, when I very first spoke to him, we felt quite aligned on this piece that the way that organisations are going to need to be agile and responsive in the future was really kind of coming quite quickly, but we had no idea how quickly. So I think it is, I still feel that prioritising the delivery of an agile organisation through either kind of project-based resource or whatever that looks like for that organisation would still be a real pillar when it comes to looking at your talent and talking about your talent. I also think that it's essential for organisations to focus on it being an inclusive approach. I think that's essential for businesses to be effective, but also it's essential for engagement and retention of talent. As is the agility to a degree, because I think that people are going to look for that more and more in their working lives. And I think that having that as an offer is essential for any business that wants to retain great talent. And then my advice to anyone would be just start those conversations as soon as possible. If you're not having them already, you must not let the grass grow. And however simple or simplistic it feels to start off with, you're better getting started and starting to put some language around it and starting to have those conversations at all levels in your organisation will start to move you towards where you need to be in terms of an effective organisation managing its talent.
Great advice there, Natalie. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to Kerry Goodman, please. So for those of you that have joined and might have missed the introduction, Kerry is the HRD at Brightside Insurance, and we'd love to understand how Brightside has dealt with the impact of COVID-19.
Thank you, Sam. With great resilience, I think would be the key word that I would take from it. I'm planning really early, so we predicted the pandemic in February in terms of that it would have some impact on us as a contact centre and as a business back in the early part of the year. And what that forced us to do was to look at our existing business continuity plan. And what clearly we had no provision for in our BCP was a pandemic. I guess we'd never been there before. It had never been an area that we needed to focus on. And I guess we gathered together a group of people where we thought, what are we going to do in this situation? yes, we've got a disaster recovery site. So we've got a provision in place if we did need to close our buildings and move to a disaster recovery site. But the problem with a disaster recovery site is it's also rented out to a huge number of other businesses. So when you all have the same issue at the same time, it's not a case of who's going to be there first with their flag saying, I claim the centre for 100 people. We realised realistically that just wasn't going to happen. So we started to look at what we'd need to do if we needed to close our building, and could we possibly work remotely. Now, I guess having a contact centre outside of an outsourced model, working remotely is probably quite unheard of. It's certainly unheard of within the insurance and the broking industry. And we realised the only way within which we could come through this is by doing that. And then immediately there was, this will never happen, there's too much security surrounding customers' details, the regulators won't like it. But actually, we have to smash through some of those barriers because we've still got a business to run. So we went through lots of painful conversations, I guess, where we hit some cultural barriers that have been there for a number of years around resistance to change ways of thinking. And we started to work through some of those issues. The end result was, at the end of March, we had everybody working from home. So from the 23rd of March, we had a 500 strong contact centre team working from home. And it was quite a painful journey to get there, obviously, because we had to pull on resources, both technical resources and, of course, knowledge around us. IT was a huge challenge for us. So most people in our business operated via desktop, and it wasn't physically possible to unhook the desktops and take them home. So how did we get everybody with remote IT equipment? So, from queuing up at Argos and grabbing ones and twos from Amazon, we eventually got there, along with probably the rest of the UK that were also fighting for the same laptops. And then, of course, configuring them was another challenge, and then delivering them and so on. So, but we got there, which was great news. And we were able to maintain continuation of service, which was the most important, objective for us. We ended up putting less than 10% on furlough. With the new flexible furlough scheme, we'll only have 5% of people remaining on furlough. And those 5% of people that we've got on furlough will have either got severe IT issues that we currently can't work around as a result of them working remotely, i.e. they're in an area of the UK where it's a Wi-Fi black spot, or they're working in a high rise or a flat with, challenging issues around technology. So, and then we've got a few people that have got some dependent issues that they're challenges that they're trying to work through as a result of schools and childcare providers being closed. But the great news is we've been able to maintain their salary at 100%. So we've maintained engagement throughout the last few months, which has been really rewarding for us. And I guess the impact of that is that we've seen absence fall off a cliff. So pre-pandemic, we were rolling around 5% absence in a contact centre. And now that maxes out around about 2%. We're starting to see some normality now, but it seems to be normalising at 2%. So it has a huge positive impact on the way in which we operate our business. We've also seen a significant reduction in people off absence with mental health related conditions. So pre-pandemic, anywhere between 30 and 50% of absence in our business would typically relate to a condition associated with mental health. We've now reduced that to 7%. So it tells us our people are so much happier working from home. We've also done a survey with our people, and the results of that survey, so we had a 98% participation in the survey, where we went out to our people and asked them what they thought about working from home. If they could choose the way in which they work in the future, what would that look like? What hours would it be? And I guess the biggest thing that came from that we've had to sit back and really listen to is 90% of our employees want to either remain working at home or have a combination of working from home and in the office. So we've decided to listen to that feedback, and we've asked our employees to remain working from home for the foreseeable future. And we're now in the process of building a more strategic model around what our future workplace looks like for us. And, you know, so typically pre-pandemic, we had 3 geographical locations in Devon, Southampton, and in Bristol. Is that right for us going forward in the future? Probably not. Will we consider maybe looking at meetup stroke social areas for our employees to meet, flexible office space? Yes, that's certainly an option that we would consider. We had no employees working on home-based contracts pre-pandemic. Now we've taken our first batch of recruits last week on home-based contracts. We've got 3 employees working outside of the UK, 2 in Italy and 1 in Slovakia. So they've been able to return home to families and continue working in the way in which they were working before. So I guess for us, we've smashed through all those culture barriers. The pandemic has been really positive because it's made that easy for us. Whereas it would have been a much harder journey to ever get there before, now that's become a lot simpler. And from a diversity and inclusion perspective, the big thing that I think us as a business are taking from this, and particularly with our EVP, is that, do you know what? We've opened up our business to more people now. So all the barriers that existed with our old, our old premises have now gone. So our premises in Bristol, for example, you could only work there if you drove. If you drove a car, you couldn't work there if you didn't drive a car, because there's no public transport or no public access there. So straight away, you know, it impacted us from a diversity perspective. It impacted us through, you know, who we could bring to join us in our business. So now those barriers are no longer there. So it's good for us. So we started to engage with with some communities around opening up options for more groups, and showing Brightside as an employer that can be diverse and inclusive. So I guess that's where we are currently as a business, and some of the challenges that we've worked through and some of the positives that we've experienced.
Wow. Yeah, the energy and the force of change and pace that I'm hearing in that has just filled me with so much enthusiasm. I can't imagine the few months that you've had. I've got a great visual of you rushing in and out of Argos and trying to get what you can. I think if the engravers was open, I'd be having your trophy sent over to you.
Not quite. It's not all me. There's a whole team of people.
I'm sure there's been a lot of challenges going on around all those positives as well. But what a huge opportunity! And I think it was mentioned in the comments by Phil as well. The phrase that resonated was smashing through those barriers.
Absolutely.
Such a powerful way of looking at it, isn't it? It's like all the structural and environmental and cultural things that we feel are holding us back. When something like that comes along, just bang, 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 going through them, and the feeling of that energy has come across. So it's really, really great to hear what Brightside have been doing.
Thank you.
There's been some fantastic comments on it, Kerry, coming through on the chat, and I think people are very passionate about this. And I know from speaking to a lot of people in my network, it's a very topical subject at the moment, which is why we want to come along and talk about it. Because I thought when we spoke before, your story around that is just so incredible, and it shows what can be achieved when, you know, barriers are taken out of the way, or there's a burning platform around this. How you drastically change your model.
There is a big question around fatigue, though. So fatigue is starting to come in now, and I guess that's something that we've not faced before. So that's new for us. So that's our next area of really, you know, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, it'd be good to open that up to the panel as one of the questions later, Kerry. I'd be interested to see what everyone's thoughts are on. One of the one of the call outs we've had from the attendees, should I say, is around your survey, and that struck me as well. Carrie, like 98% take up on a survey. I mean, that's, you know, people, if for a general engagement survey, people would break their right arms off for a night.
I know, yeah.
You must be doing something right.
Well, I think people were keen to tell us, because we'd asked them to be involved in what the future workplace looks like, they were keen to give us their opinion, and I think that's really important. Most people, interestingly, the highest flexible working option that people wanted was condensed hours. So they want 4-day weeks. So we have to listen to that. So we've got to listen to that, yeah? We've got to find a way of listening to that and building it into our model. Because we want people to work what they want. Yeah, and it still work for the business as well.
Yeah.
It might be good for you, I'll connect you outside of this, Kerry, but it'd be good for you to speak to the US team at the Body Shop, because I was speaking to them the other week. They've moved to that model, so they are going to their market is operating on a 4-day working week, and it is working for them. And
brilliant.
It has impacted their revenue.
I'd love to.
Martin, if I can jump in here, I have actually worked with a company as part of their flexible working policy, where they have actually moved to 4-day weeks, and what they did was that everyone still works 37.5 hours, but it's done over 4 days as opposed to 5 days. So the productivity is not significantly affected. So it is possible. It's possible. And the other way they have done it as well is that so that the company isn't shut down completely on one day, they kind of stagger it. So, you know, your 4-day kind of rotates. So some people would work Mondays to Thursdays, some work Tuesdays to Fridays, et cetera, et cetera. So that's great. I love it, Kerry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. That was very illuminating. And I think there's going to be a lot of conversation that sparked as a result of that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Brilliant, which leads us on nicely. So speaking of illuminating people, Romeo. Thank you again for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it.
No problem.
And so for those of you that don't know, Romeo is the CEO of Lumerous. And in fact, Romeo, I'll let you briefly introduce yourself.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Martin. So I'm the CEO of Lumerous. Lumerous PLC. We're a boutique consultancy. We work globally with companies around governance. So everything to do with the boards. And we also work in the space of organizational health, which includes organizational culture, diversity and inclusion, or as I now call it, inclusion and belonging. It's a very big piece. And we work also in the space of what we call leadership journeys. So our whole ethos is to empower leaders to run their businesses with a sense of purpose to have a significant impact in the world. Yeah.
Amazing. So Romeo, I know we've had many conversations about this, but in light of what's going on at the moment in the world and the increased focus around inclusion on the back of the increased movement that is the Black Lives Matter movement, what do you see as the greatest opportunities for society to act on this at the moment?
All right, so for me, one of the reasons why I focus a lot of the work that we do at Lumerous with working with businesses around this, and Martin, you know, we've spoke about this, we are so aligned where this is concerned, is that we believe that businesses in a number of ways impact the world from the Industrial Revolution, you know, significantly. Businesses have the money to employ lobbyists to help change policy that affects society. But more importantly, we all work in this place called a corporate structure. And so if we have the opportunity to kind of shape the minds of the individuals that work within this corporate structure, these individuals then go back to their communities, and they volunteer in society in many different ways, whether or not it's in their churches or other organizations, you know, in schools. They have children. And so this new mindset, they then take back with them to impact the wider society. And therefore, that's how we can then have, be part of the solution of impacting. So I think that's one thing that that businesses can do in terms of changing society. If we look at society in general, I think now is the time for us to do a couple of things. One is, to be very open in terms of, having an honest conversation without judgment, right? We don't need to be saying, oh, but your ancestors did this, or my ancestor did this, or whatever. It's about, similar to, and there, it's questionable whether or not it was successful in, for example, in South Africa, when they had the Truth and Reconciliation period. Just having an honest, open conversation so that everyone understands my lived experiences, your lived experiences, so that we can identify some of the struggles that people go through on a day-to-day basis. Because, and I say this to the Black community, it's not because someone isn't Black doesn't mean that they don't understand the whole notion of discrimination, maybe not racism, but discrimination, or have similar challenges that they can identify with. And it's when we can identify people who, when we have these discussions and someone say, really? But, I'm from a working class background and I felt like that, etc., etc. That person then becomes such a massive advocate for you, because that person can then identify themselves in your struggle, right? So as a society, we need to have those kind of open conversations. The beautiful thing about the internet, and when I went to a few of the marches, what I recognized was that there were so much young people, but there were so much young people. It was such a diverse group of young people as well, right? And the fact is, when I had conversations with these young people, they were able to educate themselves by using the internet, because this is not something that they were taught in schools. So the internet is now a beautiful thing where people can actually, there's bad information out there, there's good information, but it's a great place where people can actually go and educate themselves about this. And it is incumbent on all of us to really educate ourselves about the issue of inclusion and belonging, because when we do that, then we can become even greater champions, where that is concerned. One big thing that I think we all need to do is to become more aware, or as they're saying in the Black community now, you need to be woke. And it's about, and I have this acronym which I use in governance. It's about, I call it VUCA, right? In a world that is volatile, and we can see this happening now with the volatility that's happening, with all the uncertainty that's going on, with all the complexity that's about to hit us, in terms of, what's on the back of COVID, and also the ambiguity, right? We have to have a greater sense of emotional intelligence in our workplace, but also in the wider society, so that we can help our organizations, help our children, our families to kind of maneuver all of this that is happening and that is about to happen. And we also need to realize, especially those of us in business, that, and for too long, companies have been doing this and society has been doing this. Ignoring the whole notion of inclusion and belonging is at your own peril. Like, there's no going back. Like, I participated I was a consultant with the Office of National Statistics 3 years ago, working on a project. And some of the data coming out is that, I think it's by 2030 or 2035, the UK is moving closer to a 50-50 split in terms of demographic. If you, Kerry spoke about the whole notion of being able to employ people from everywhere because of the ability to work digitally. I mean, my company, we have closed our office and everyone is now working digitally. What I've now realized is that the world is my marketplace in terms of hiring, right? And with that, you're going to inject more diverse people, more diversity of thought, all of that. And we have to embrace that, right? So we can't ignore the fact that India has 1 billion people, China has 1 billion people, Africa has 50% of the population of Africa are educated to a master's degree level, right? There is talent there that we can inject in our teams to help our business, our business grow. So, you know, in a kind of a nutshell, you know, those are some of the things that I think that both us in the business world and also in society needs to do. Some of the challenges that businesses are going to face, especially coming out of this period, is what I call reverting to type, because people have been outside of the bubble of the corporate norm for such a long time. They go back into their homes, into their own kind of, you know, in their own space, and they don't necessarily have to be inclusive, because they might, like, for example, I have gone back into a space in my space which is predominantly people from either from an ethnic background, right? And predominantly males as well, right? So I have kind of reverted to type, and I've had to, and thank God for things like Zoom, where I'm now kind of participating and checking in with different people and being able to do that. But it's something that businesses need to be aware of, that people coming back into the place of work, there's going to have to be a period of re-educating people around this whole notion of inclusion and belonging. And the other thing that we're going to struggle with is, you know, what does inclusion and belonging it looks like in the new normal, when people are working away from each other and you know, we're not in the, and sometimes the only time we see each other is when we jump on a Zoom call. You know, you don't get to see the nuances of individuals and understand more about them. You don't get to have that coffee catch up in the lunchroom and just kind of, you know, see the cultural differences and stuff like that. So those are some of the challenges that I think over the next couple of months we will have to deal with.
Just building on that for a second, Fredo, because I obviously you and I have had many a conversation about this, and we're incredibly passionate about inclusion. And it feels like the world is now starting to catch up to that a little bit. And I'm probably speaking in a
finally.
But yeah, it does really feel like, you know, it's almost like, oh, finally everyone's getting it now. But why, you know, thinking about what you said there, the internet is not a new invention. We've had the internet for quite some time now. The term inclusion and, you know, D&I managers and all those types of roles have existed in companies for a quite lengthy period. What's different now then, do you think, as to why all of a sudden there is the energy around this that's been lacking before?
So that's a good question. And I was having a discussion a few days ago with a professor from City University who is he is a professor of business psychology, and he's also a D&I. He's written many journals and articles on D&I, and his kind of unscientific thinking, and this is something that I was thinking about as well, is that what COVID has done is that it has allowed us to spend a lot more time with ourselves and with our thoughts, right? So we're not busy running up and down one meeting after the other. It could be on Zoom, but we have a lot more time to spend with our thoughts. And you know, what he was saying was that by doing that, people tend to become more aware of themselves and become aware of what's important to them. It become more aware of what is valuable to me, what's my purpose. So when something like a George Floyd situation happens and you have time, because if this had happened when things was normal, most of us probably would not have even had time to see this whole thing. But now that we're in our own space, we're bombarded on social media, on the news, we spend time watching the video. And because we have become so much more aware of ourselves, this then starts playing on our consciousness. And we are now saying, is this really how the world used to be? That doesn't sit well with me. That doesn't sit well with what I want as a person in this world. That doesn't sit well with what I want, the place that I want my children and my grandchildren to grow up in. And therefore, people are now becoming far more conscious and says, no, that's not right. You know what I mean? So I think that's a part of it as well. The other thing as well is that D&I practitioners are now, you know, agitating more on the back of this, especially people from an ethnic background. They're now saying, look, we have been saying to you for a long time, this is how we feel, and you have not been listening, right? And so I think companies are now, because of those two factors, are now taking it far more serious. And the thing is that, you know, like, for example, I would see some things online where people are saying, oh, but all lives matter, or, people from an Asian background, do suffer discrimination, or, for example, what Priti Patel said in Parliament, etc. What we all need to realize is that on the back of this whole issue, inclusion and belonging generally will benefit, because what will happen is that now we're having a conversation, especially in the gender space, that, okay, we have totally neglected the BAME woman in the gender space, because the gender space was predominantly focused on white middle-class women. We've neglected the BAME woman, we've neglected the working class woman. In the LGBTQ space, we're now having that conversation about, shit, we have totally forgot about this cohort of people over here who are from the BAME community, and that they are LGBTQ as well. In the disability space, we're having those conversations. So right across the spectrum, the whole notion of diversity and inclusion will benefit on the back of this.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what you've just highlighted is, the importance, again, of intersectionality. It's not just about looking at any one demographic. It's about how do we make sure that we're not, typecasting or pigeonholing people into certain brackets, because we're all humans and we don't fit neatly into one little box.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of unleashed, really.
and the whole notion as well of diversity. That's what diversity has done. Diversity has kind of created these silos. And that's why I tend to move away from the term diversity, right? Because diversity is part of inclusion and belonging, right? You cannot have inclusion and belonging without diversity. You can have diversity without any of that, right? So if we get rid of the whole notion of diversity and say, how do we make our space more inclusive and belonging? And by doing that, right, then we start creating the equity that is required for the level play field for everyone to succeed and to progress in corporate and in society.
I agree. Now, because we've got such fabulous panelists, I could genuinely sit and talk to you people all day about these subjects, as you know, and I've spent many hours talking to many of you about these subjects. In the interest of time for our lovely audience, we're getting quite a few questions pop in now. I'm just going to wrap up with one question from us, then we're going to move over to Q&A. So if any of you have got any burning questions, feel free to pop them through now. But to all of our wonderful panelists, what advice would you give, based on your own experience in recent months, to people that are tuning in today about how do they prepare for the future of the workplace and for the future of inclusion? Let's start with you, Romeo.
I would say, and I've said this to my team completely, is just look towards the future with a very open mind. Try and not build any expectations, because things are just changing, so rapidly. We're now seeing the second wave coming. What is that going to look like? We're talking about, a vaccine and whether or not there's going to be a chip attached to it, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's about, being open and not having any expectations. And I think it's Natalie who spoke about being agile. I'm an advocate for that, because I'm a certified agile professional, and so I build this in the organization, and it's so. And when I work with organizations, I try and encourage them to be an agile organization, because agility is the best thing now. Because what that means is that as you see the challenge, as things changes, you are so flexible that you're looking at, right, what are these challenges? What do we need to do to confront them? And as you move, you implement and move, you learn and you keep improving. You learn and you keep improving. So I think being no expectations, openness, and being very agile is the way to deal with the future.
Thanks, Romeo. The lovely Kerry, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, yeah, I guess my thoughts are, the most important thing for me would be, as a business, would be purposeful. Keep reminding yourself, of your purpose. Keep reminding yourself, your people, of your business's purpose. Stay close to your employees' purposes. So purpose is a really key piece for me there. Give our employees a voice. Yeah, it's important that we give employees a voice and we listen to what they're telling us. Their view is incredibly important on the future of any organisation. Keep communication fluid. keep it going. You know, working remotely, communication is absolutely key to keep the energy there and getting that right balance. Look out for warning signs amongst your people. Okay, so fatigue, like I said, is creeping in. Not everybody's enjoying it. Stay close to those that aren't enjoying it and work with them. And then finally, I guess prepare to make allowances for people in the future wanting to live more simpler lives. Okay, so, you know, people have come through this pandemic living quite a simple life, and, you know, I think we need to prepare that going forward, some people, it's not going to be the same again, and we have to adjust to allow for that. And if that means as businesses we have to become, you know, we have to become more agile, we have to fit with our employees' purpose as well.
Yeah.
So those would be my key.
That's amazing, thank you. Natalie and Pat, over to you folks.
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned previously around sort of that focus on agility, and Romeo and Kerry have said the same. But one of the things that I really think but I personally think is a huge opportunity is this piece around barriers, and the ways of working have been broken down, and the rule book has kind of been thrown out of the window for many organisations. And that is the perfect sort of set of circumstances for opportunity, really, for both organisations and for talent. And I think that people should see what they can do to embrace those changes and embrace the real good that we're seeing there. And I think from a talent perspective, Romeo said, I really liked your phrase, the world is going to be your marketplace for talent now, because you are, you know, it changes everything. If you need somebody doing a specific role, what does it matter if they're not based in the same country as you anymore? Everything has changed. So I think as an organisation, we really need to look at our offering for talent, or our proposition for them, and think about all of the kind of good changes that we have experienced, and think about how we approach and engage with our talent kind of going forward, and make that deliberately make that different and sustain this kind of wave of change. And I think I completely agree with Kerry, just listen to your people as well on what's working for them in that regard.
Thanks, Natalie. Pat?
Yeah, I think similar themes to what are being spoken about. I think there's two big things to keep in mind. One is that I think the fundamentals haven't shifted as much as one might have assumed they would earlier in this. You know, we've been polling employees that use our product around what the benefit is, and my assumption was, you know, career is a top of the Maslow hierarchy of need kind of issue. It's a self-actualization thing, and when unemployment's at 15% and the world is just super uncertain, a paycheck's gonna be more important than having the most optimal career. But what we found was actually there was very little change in how employees were viewing the use of tools like Paddle. You know, work from home is not a new concept. The need for a greater focus on inclusion is not new, even if some companies are just realizing it. So I think the fundamentals are going to remain the same. The thing that's changed is your ability to test new approaches. The change management piece is less important than it was. And so what I hope we can do is kind of take that build that psychological safety at an organizational level. Take a few more risks as talent teams. If before this 9 out of 10 of your tests were positive, you probably were waiting too long to test. So try a few more things, throw a few more things at the wall and see what sticks is my big takeaway from this.
Thanks for that, Pat. That's really insightful. We're getting some brilliant questions coming from our audience. I'm mindful because of the volume of questions, we may not get time to answer all of them, but we'll do our very best to rattle through them. I promise you, for those of you that have commented or asked questions, we will follow up with you separately, and we'll link you in with the respective specialists, either at Unleashed or at one of our panelists today. One of the questions is around inclusion, Romeo, so I think you may be well placed to answer this given your expertise in this area. And this is something that's been incredibly topical, actually, and a lot of people have mentioned this to me of late. It seems a lot of businesses are now starting to set targets around diversity, particularly for the number, either quotas or numbers of certain protected characteristics, particularly ethnicity at the moment, obviously in the light of the Black Lives Matter movement. what's your view on the setting of targets? Yay or nay?
So my view has changed completely. Before, I used to be encouraging companies to set aspirational targets. I did some work with EY, and this was one of the things that we spoke about. But over the years, that has not made any significant difference. And the concept that was used in the gender case is very clear. When companies were given a target that this must happen, you must have X number of women on your boards, it happened. And you can see, we work a lot in the finance sector, and you can see the governance structures just changing completely in some of these finance companies because they now have a female on the board, because women don't put up with foolishness, right? And so,
well, I work with them, Romeo.
Of course, I mean, I was brought up by my mother and my grandmother. I know this, and so I think that it's time enough for companies to do that, to set targets for ethnicity to get to a certain level, because usually the argument is, oh, but we're a very diverse company, but when you look at the top, there's usually none there. In the middle section and below, that's it. But targets alone aren't the panacea. You have to set targets, and you have to put in a support mechanism to help these people from an ethnic background have the career growth that they would require.
Cool. Thanks for that, Romeo. This one I'm going to go to Kerry on, I think. Feel free to throw something virtually at me, Kerry, that's fine. Could be a while before I see you.
I've already done it.
So, there's obviously a lot of distrust, particularly we're seeing it on social media more and more around people's distrust for, particularly in the UK, around the government. And also in businesses in general. I think in response to Black Lives Matter, you're seeing people in a far more public way take businesses on social media and make their voices heard. So one of the comments is that it feels like there's a lack of trust there in society at the moment. What do you think we could do to start building trust back up with our people?
I guess not wait for the answer. I guess as we found as we've gone through the pandemic, do what you think's the right thing to do. It generally is. And seek feedback from your people. Be transparent that, yes, do you know what, that there's a lack of clarity coming from the government. We believe that this is the right thing to do, and engage your people on giving you feedback on that. Once again, it just comes back to giving employees a voice and doing the right thing as a business. We know that some of the decisions that have come out of the government in the past couple of months have changed daily, and if we waited and responded to all those changes, we'd have completely disengaged our employees.
That's great.
Yeah.
See, I knew you were the right person to ask, Kerry. So I'm mindful we've got a ton more questions, but we are coming up to time. And we promised a hard stop for many of the panellists that got in touch today, and for our attendees as well, because I'm conscious that particularly in the UK, which I know the majority of our participants are from, the sun is raging, and so we don't want to keep you from enjoying that, particularly at the end of the day. Just want to say before we wrap up, a massive thank you to all of our panellists who have been phenomenal as always. Please do check them out on LinkedIn. I've learned a phenomenal amount by working with these individuals over the years. Truly inspirational and interesting people. So feel free to connect with them off here on LinkedIn. And if you want to find out more about us at Unleashed, check us out via our social channels, which will be popping up very shortly. You can also find out more about our business on www.unleashed.org.uk. And last but not least, I'd like to pay special thanks to the very talented Sarah Thompson, without whom this webinar would not have been possible. For anyone that knows me, technical bits are not my strong suit. And also,
welcome.
And also to my partner in crime and amazing business partner, who again, without this this week's support particularly, none of this would be happening. So massive thank you. Thank you all for participating, sharing your thoughts and ideas. We will be doing more of these webinars over the coming weeks, so check out our channels. And if there's anything that you want to know or any information, please feel free to reach out to either of us. But from Sam and myself, wishing you all the most fabulous evening, wherever you are in the world, or morning, depending on where you are, and our very best, and thank you all for your time.